Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Well, it's the end of the week again, so it's time for our weekly market update and forecast where we look at capacity, we take a look at diesel prices, volumes, spot load rates, spot load volumes, and then we break it down into what to expect for flatbeds, reefers, and dry vans for next week. Now, if you're new to my channel, welcome. I teach about the trucking industry, the freight market, how it all ties into the spot market since we're spot carriers. I use data as well as my own experience running two trucking companies to try and make sense of the messy situation we find ourselves in with the trucking industry right now. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe and join an awesome community. So I'm going to do something that I usually do not do, but considering the fact that lately I have been triggering people with my videos when I don't have the best of news, here it is. If you're not ready to hear upsetting news today, I recommend moving on to a different video for now because today's video doesn't have the best news. Now, honestly, I have been questioning whether to make this video at all because, as a lot of you guys know, I am not a fan of upsetting people either. But we have two choices, right? We can either choose to live in La La Land where everything is fantastic, even if it's a lie, or we choose to look the truth in the face and make decisions based on that reality. So it's up to you whether to watch this video, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and focus on this week's numbers. Ready? Let's go. Now, before we actually go to the charts, a few things I want to say. Number one, this Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing another live Q&A about the industry. So if you have any industry-related questions about the market or whatnot, or you just want to chat with other industry professionals, you know where to find me. Second, and I'm kind of repeating myself here, I know that we're all struggling right now. And when you're struggling and I make videos giving you bad news, it's the same thing as pouring salt in an open wound. The thing is, if our perception of reality is skewed, our decision-making process and our decisions are also then skewed. And I refuse to be responsible for people making bad decisions. When making this channel in the very beginning, I promised myself as well as you guys full transparency at the heart of each video, even when that transparency is hard to swallow. I know it's hard to swallow for me. As I said before, I had to take a pause and figure out whether I wanted to make this video. Was I ready to upset people and hurt people who are already down? And the reality is, I would rather tell you the unpleasant truth so that you are better prepared than either hide from the truth by not making a video or tell you that everything is great so that you can make horrible decisions. So I think I prepared you well enough for the content of this video, so let's get into the data. All right, so we're going to start with the net changes in trucking authorities, which means that we're calculating how many carriers did we lose or gain net last week. So as of last week, as of September 15th, we only lost 158 carriers last week, which is quite a bit less than the week before where we lost over 900 carriers. Now, this doesn't really concern me much, and the reason is because throughout the year, since the beginning of the year, you can see that we have had moments where we did lose a minimal amount of carriers week over week, but still, as long as this change is negative, I would say we're still on the right track. So now let's take a look at the total carrier details in terms of authorities. Now, this white line is what we looked at right now, which is the net change in carrier population. Then we have revocations right here in red and the total trucking authorities, the total number of MCs in the market. One thing I can tell you is that the revocation number went down. So the only explanation to such a small net carrier loss is the fact that more carriers came into the market, new carriers came into the market last week, possibly because they're trying to catch that peak season, which unfortunately looks like it's not going to happen, or it's going to be very muted this year. But in terms of the total trucking authorities, you can see that since the beginning of the year, we have been on our way down. We still are on our way down. The only thing is that the rate at which it's decreasing has slowed down a little bit. Now let's take a look at the difference between the carrier capacity or the amount of MCs in the market and the general freight volume right here. So the carrier capacity or the amount of MCs is the blue line. This is the total freight volume. And we can see that since the beginning of the year, volumes have been steadily and continuously increasing. Okay, with some peaks and valleys, of course, but the trend is an increasing trend. Since the beginning of the year, we actually increased in volume by 24%, but we saw a decrease in total MCs of 4%. So that means that the supply and demand curve, we'll call it, is moving in the right direction, albeit very, very slowly, but it is auto-correcting. Now onto the general freight market, and we're always going to start with the outbound volumes versus rejections on the general freight market. We're not talking about the spot market here. I'm not going to define what these two are because I'll put the definitions down below in the description for you guys. All right, volumes are blue, rejections are white. What can we see? Now, this is also since the beginning of the year. We can see that volumes, as I said before, they are continuously increasing, which is good news. However, rejections, unfortunately, made a U-turn since the beginning of September. So you can see rejections kind of made a U-turn in the wrong direction. Currently, rejection rates are for the first time since, when was it? It was since the middle to end of August. For the first time, we are below that 4% mark. We are at 3.9, which means that out of the total volume in the freight market, only 3.9% of those loads is actually getting pushed into the spot market. So yeah, unfortunately, this is not great news. Scared the bejesus out of me, so I decided to look whether maybe there is a pattern that happens every time during this time of year. I looked at the rejection rates over the past 5 years. I've shown this chart more times than I can remember, but again, this is us right here, this blue line. These will be attached down below if you want to look closer. This is us here, the blue line. Every other color is a prior year. And for a while there, it looked like we are going to surpass this purple line, which was the 2019 rejection levels. But unfortunately, it made a U-turn, right? And again, we are at the lowest rejection level in 5 years. Now, as much as I'd love to say at least there's going to be a turnaround considering the 5-year pattern, the reality is if we put a line right here, something we can see is that almost every year, except for 2020, it looks like there was a decrease in rejections from here on out. So the question is this going to go really low, or is it going to stabilize? Is it going to do something crazy and turn around? But unfortunately, the pattern doesn't look good at the moment. Now, I did the same thing for volumes, looked at the 5-year average. Again, this blue line is us. And in terms of volumes, while we are below the 2020, 2021, and 2022 levels, we are above the 2018 and 2019 levels. Volumes are very important because, let me show you. So if we consider this chart right here, let's say that the rejection rate is always 4%. It never changes, for example, but the volume does. Let's say that the volume consists of 100 loads. That means that around 4 loads are actually ending up on the spot market. Now, again, we're not going to change the rejection level, but let's say now the volume increased like it does, and it's now 150 loads on the market. Well, that means now 6 loads are getting on the spot market. Does that make sense? So volumes are very important to consider together with rejection rates. But yeah, I'm not liking the trend at the moment. All right, now the spot versus contract market and the difference between the two. At the moment, spot carriers are earning 76 cents less per mile than those contract carriers. Now, it is a decrease. Last week, we were at around 79 cents in terms of the difference, so it's a decrease of 3 cents. I believe that as contracts do get renegotiated, and you guys said this in the comments as well, that shippers are renegotiating those contracts more often than they used to because they're trying to grab the market situation right now or grab hold of the opportunities this market presents them to save money. So I expect that this gap will close. But for now, just like last week I said, the contract market is rather resilient. Now, let's take a look at diesel prices, and I don't have good news for you guys here. Diesel prices are continuing to go up like crazy. And currently we're at an average of $4.60 per gallon on a national level, which should scare all of us because unfortunately, income is not the only thing that is important in the net income formula, right? The expense of the diesel price is eroding that bottom line for all of us. So this is really, really upsetting. I don't know when it's going to make a U-turn the way tender rejections did. Let's hope it's soon. But if we take a look at the diesel map, we can see that for the most part, there were increases everywhere, specifically in California, where week over week, it increased like 3.9 to 4% in 1 week. It's insane. But there were decreases in Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, and Georgia, it looks like. So these are the markets that saw some decreases. All right, let's look at flatbed specific data, starting with the spot market volumes. As of last week, we can see that spot volumes for flatbeds increased like they do every single year. This is normal. Unfortunately, we're way below that black dotted line, below the 5-year average. But what we can expect from this, the pattern is being followed, albeit below it, but yes, the pattern is being followed. So what we can expect is that volumes will slowly decrease until the end of the year for flatbeds. Now, if we take a look at spot rates for flatbeds right here, we can see that those decreased from last week, and currently we're at $2.30 per mile, whereas the 5-year average is at $2.40 per mile. When I say that we should be at $2.40, I don't mean it's a good idea to haul for that rate. I mean, that's what the 5-year average shows us. I've had several comments reprimanding me for saying we should be at $2.40, but in reality, we should be taking $3 per mile. I get it. I'm just reading the data here. Don't kill the messenger. Anyway, the thing is here is that the pattern is being followed as well. And what we can expect is kind of stability in rates until around week 44 right here, where there will be a little drop. And this is the end of October. So this is what to expect with flatbeds, at least if we follow that or continue following that 5-year pattern. Now, as a lot of you guys know, unfortunately, Sonar does not provide any data, significant data for flatbeds. So I'm forced to use this DAT hot map in order to show you good and bad areas. The thing is, you can see the hot areas are still Oregon, Idaho, Spokane, even Flagstaff, Arizona, and then the South for flatbeds. But as I showed you in the video on Monday when I was booking a load from Eugene, Oregon for my flatbed, it's not what it seems. It was really hard to book a normal load from there. And basically what I want to teach you is when you're looking at this map, you have to consider that all it shows you is how many loads are posted versus how many trucks are posted. What it doesn't consider is that a broker might post the same load over and over again, increasing that load volume, and the carriers might not post their trucks, decreasing the amount of trucks. From my experience, the South is an interesting place for flatbeds. Relatively, do not go to Texas. There is nothing there. It's crazy. Sometimes the Midwest can be an interesting place as well, but those markets change constantly. Like which market in the Midwest is going to be good changes on a daily basis pretty much. Now, reefers. In terms of spot volume, we see that there was an increase, a small increase in spot volume, just like it happens every single year. We are following this 5-year pattern, and we can expect that around week 45 or week 44, the end of October, volumes will start increasing because of the holiday season where things have to be shipped out really quickly, especially food, because people celebrate by eating together, right? So let's take a look at the spot rates for reefers. Reefer spot rates went down quite significantly. They are actually at the lowest point in 5 weeks. But again, we're following that 5-year pattern. Currently, we're at around $2.40 per mile, whereas the 5-year average tells us that we should be around $2.60 per mile for this time of year. But again, following that 5-year pattern, which shows us that around week 43, middle of October or so, rates should start climbing up for reefers. Again, holiday season, people want to eat and celebrate. People crave a sense of normalcy, right? Now let's take a look at the general freight market, starting with volumes. What we can see for reefers is that Idaho, Utah, and Northern California saw a small increase in volume since last week. Missouri, parts of Iowa and Illinois, Minnesota, South Dakota, Michigan, the San Antonio area, it looks like, and then Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, upstate New York, Massachusetts, all of these saw an increase in general freight volume. Now, the plain states are flat, there's nothing there, but let's take a look at reefer rejections. So for reefer rejections, a little bit of a more interesting map, we can see that the Pendleton, Oregon area saw a big increase in rejections. We can also see North Dakota, Lincoln, Nebraska, parts of Mississippi, Oklahoma, Indiana, upstate New York, North Carolina, and even Miami, Florida, where there are no rejections, by the way, because you can see it's flat. These are places where rejections increased. Now, I know that I usually show you a map of the DAT heat map, spot market map, but I decided not to do that. The only reason I show it for flatbeds is because I don't have any other data available to me. So I know that Sonar is the best tool to use in order to predict where to go next week to grab relatively better opportunities. So let's take a look. So for reefers next week, Twin Falls, Idaho, 40.64% rejection. Crazy volume, as you can see. Then we have Pendleton, Oregon market, less volume, but 40.87% rejection. Then we have Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is 26.72% rejection, decent volume. Then we have Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is right here, and that's 18.75% rejection. And then the Midwest, which ranges from 11 to 18% rejection. So with a reefer, what I recommend is the same thing I recommended last week. Try to stay within the Midwest as much as possible, hitting Idaho and the Pendleton, Oregon area, which includes Grandview, Washington, and back again. Be careful of what lanes you're booking for what rate, right? Because the lanes from here and here will be pushing you to dead markets if you let them. Those that will be the best paying loads. So be careful. At least that's what I'm planning to do with my reefer next week. I'm going to try to keep my guy in the Midwest and in the Pacific Northwest. Finally, we have dry vans with the spot volumes first, and we can see spot volumes just like for the other two equipment types, those increased, and they're following a 5-year pattern. Now, it looks like volumes will continue increasing for a couple of weeks here until they kind of go down, stabilize, and then go up again towards the end of the year. In terms of spot rates for dry vans, unfortunately, we saw a nice decrease and we're back to less than $2 per mile on average. Currently, we're at $1.95 per mile on average for the posted rates. This is before deadhead. This is just loaded miles, whereas the 5-year average shows us that we should be around the $2.17 mark. The good news is, of course, that we are, again, following that 5-year pattern, which is important to try and predict as much as possible what will happen next. And what we can see is around week 44, again, end of October, is when those rates will start slowly climbing up because of holiday season, wreaths, whatnot. I don't know, what do dry vans transport during the holiday season? Dry goods, whatnot, right? Canned goods, I don't know, whatever it is. So yeah, we can expect that around the end of October, we will see some sort of rate increase. I don't know by how much because I am expecting a muted peak season. But let's take a look at what happened in the general freight market with volumes for dry vans. Well, this is definitely a very colorful map, and we can see that it's all over the place, right? Houston, Texas saw volume increases. We see that Portland, Oregon saw volume increases. Those are the big significant ones. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's dark blue as well as the height is there, which means there's more volume there to begin with. We can see that significant decreases happened in Utah, in Missouri, in Jacksonville, Florida, upstate New York, and in a lot of the Midwest as well. What about rejection rates? Well, rejection rates, again, more interesting. West Coast is dying in terms of rejection rates with the exception of Spokane, Washington, but this is just if we're looking at rejections. We can see that Montana, North and South Dakota had an increase. Virginia, West Virginia, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Dallas, Texas, Colorado, and all of Nebraska. Everything else is not so interesting. Southern California rejections plummeted down. So let's take a look at where you need to go next week in order to grab those relatively better opportunities as a dry van operator. So honestly, I have only two areas to recommend. Number one, we have the Green Bay, Wisconsin market, which is at 13.12% rejection. I'm not considering South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming because those are flat. There's nothing there. The second market is the Midwestern market, where the rejection rate is on average 6%. Not as great as for a reefer, but in comparison to other market areas, this is the relatively better one. I would definitely stay away from the West Coast, even California. Even though the volume makes up for the lack of rejection rates, it's surrounded by death, right? And the fuel prices are really high. Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania might be an interesting market to look at, especially because it's very close to Ohio. I wouldn't go to West Virginia or Virginia because it's flat. There is no volume there. And as we already saw, volume is very important to consider when looking at relatively better markets. Yeah, it's a bummer that the data is the way it is right now. We can't do anything to change it, but we can learn from it and plan from it. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? Now, I'm not going to recommend what steps you have to take because everyone's operations are different, but I'm happy to share what my biggest steps will be from here on out. I am planning to ride this thing out, and I refuse to let this temporary, and yes, it is a temporary bad market situation, drive me out. So first and foremost, I'm focusing on cash flow. Every single month in the beginning of the month, I create a spreadsheet with all my fixed expenses and due dates and an overestimation of my variable expenses and due dates. I know exactly how much money is going to be going out every single day, a month in advance, pretty much. So it allows me to make decisions in advance in order to keep that cash flow flowing smoothly. Now, those unexpected expenses will always go on my company credit card that has to be paid off a month later. Number two, my load booking decisions are not only based on what is the best rate per mile out there and how can I get the highest rate per mile. There is a second layer to that, and that second layer is cash flow. How much money do I have to make every day and every week in order for cash flow to increase, considering all these expenses that I have either overestimated or I am expecting in the next month? And number three, one day at a time and consistency. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that I am prone to looking 257 steps ahead, but in the current situation, that one day at a time mentality is a skill that we should all get to know a little bit better. Anyway, guys, wishing you all a wonderful rest of your week. I'll see some of you Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern for the live, and for everyone else, I'll see you in the next video.